is on. Laura, do you want to read our?
I sure will.
intro?
Here we go. This open meeting of the Mendon Select Board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 24th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment. For this meeting, the Mendon Select Board is convening by telephone conference as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join. Back to you, Mark.
Thank you. Nice to hear that some of that is becoming obsolete. So making progress since that was developed. All right, so we have one item on the agenda, and it's a very important item, which is the Mendon Upton Regional School District budget. We had a vote at the town election. The override had failed by a little over 100 votes. The school committee has met just last night and recertified the budget, which is the same number that we voted on at town meeting and at the ballot. So this leaves the selectmen to the board to discuss next steps. And I don't know if Joe or Jay want to talk about the meeting you had last night with the school committee.
I'd be happy to talk a little bit about it, Mark. Good evening, Mark, and everybody else here this evening. I think the school committee deliberated in a very thoughtful manner about the budget that was put forward, and I presented 3 options for them. And, quite frankly, at this point in time, they could do one of 3 things. One, do nothing and accept approximately $2.1 million in cuts to the school department, because as I'm sure all of you know, while the override was for the amount of a little more than $803,000, with Upton's proportional match of approximately $1.3 million, it represents $2.1 million in funding from local assessments that at this point in time we cannot access. They could certify at the same exact amount, which they did, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, or they could certify strictly at level services, meaning none of those 7.0 FTE new positions or restored positions would be put in the budget. After a lot of discussion, some questions from the community, they made the decision to recertify at the same amount for the simple reason that they felt like the new positions were of an imperative need due to what our kids need coming out of the pandemic. And then also some other positions, like the restoration of the library media position has implications for the high school's accreditation through NEASC. So that essentially was the conversation and the calculus that went into their decision-making. And as you set the table, Mark, that's where we are here and now. Jay, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I think you covered it pretty well. I think critical to that is, at least from what I thought going in, was how the town would handle any requests from the school, whether it was the same or a lesser amount. I think accepting, saying, okay, we're going to cut 2.1 million, certainly an option, but not an option we were going to consider. But if the town is going to put it to an override, then I think that's where the committee felt like if that's the case, then we might as well try to get what we need as opposed to an override that doesn't really fulfill the needs that the district is looking for.
I do have one question, just for documentation's sake. I know that the amount we appropriated at town meeting before the override or without the override was about 10.6 million. What is the actual total certified budget from all different sources, and what percentage does this $2.1 million cut represent as a total of the entire budget from all sources, meaning state funding, any federal funding, everything else, everything rolled into it? What does that percentage represent, that 2.1? If you were to do nothing and accept it, what percentage would that have represented of the total budget?
I can get that for you. Just give me about 30 seconds to do some quick math.
Yeah, I think just looking at your funding sheet, and please correct me if my mental math is wrong. I think it probably represents pushing somewhere between 6 and 7% of our total budget.
This divided by this. Hang on. 5.5%.
Okay, so if you had decided to do nothing, you would have had to cull 5.5% out of your total budget.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it would leave the budget. If they did nothing and just took it as it is, it means that our net total increase in our budget is $327,806. Of which the majority of that's probably coming from Upton because Mendon doesn't have an increase.
Well, but based on us not contributing anymore, and they're not having to contribute their piece, would there be an increase? I mean, that 2.1 is because they didn't give their side of it either, right?
Correct.
They can't if we don't. It has to match, so they can't.
Right. So the idea that
they still have a net increase of about $480,000 though from the side of Upton, mostly because their MLC's up 361. So that's where their increase is coming from.
And the state had told us that ours was actually down a little bit.
Yeah,
right?
a couple thousand.
Yeah, right, but
Actually.
not significant, but right, but that's
Yep.
the issue. Yeah. Okay. You're muted, Mark.
So Mark, you're gonna go?
Thank you. Lonnie, go ahead.
So I don't know where we really are in the discussion, but Joe and I talked a couple times today. There was some information that was posed a question this morning. Was this override more or less a 5-year plan like it was in 2015? And I couldn't answer that question. I poked around a little bit, and it seemed that nobody really knew. But when I spoke to Joe, the answer from Joe was, yes, this would be another 5-year plan. And I don't, Joe, if you want to speak about it a little bit more, but I'll just be brief here that was the idea here. But I don't know that a lot of people know that answer, right? From everybody I've spoken to, whether we missed it or I definitely didn't know. So neither here nor there. When I talked to Joe again about it, when we talked a little bit more in detail, it was that, that may make a huge difference in the way people may vote for this, based on the fact that, well, we shouldn't expect another override request in that 5-year period, till FY26, and that we'll all work together to, as we do on every budget, but work a little bit harder to make sure we stay in that 2.5% increase. And then, with not even committing to any new growth at this point, but if it's possible, then we would be able to make that decision on a year-by-year basis. So, Joe, if you would concur that that's what our discussion was, or maybe make sure that I said it right. That may make a big difference in how people vote. And if it is the case, then I think we need to make an effort to get that information out there better.
Thank you, Lonnie. Yeah, I think you've characterized our conversation. I can say, and I could show you evidence going back to 2015 and the Forward 15 campaign, that both myself and the school committee that served at that time were very, very explicit about, that this was a 5-year, we would not come back asking for 5 years. And we kept our promise. I know that probably all three of you, Mike, Mark, and Lonnie, were in the PDC probably in February of 2020. I know it seems like 7 years ago now. But if you recall, the original budget request was going to require, for this current fiscal year, for FY21, a significant override. And a lot of the positions and the pieces that we were looking for, that we felt were really imperative in moving the district forward in its strategic plan, were in that original FY21 request. We dramatically pared it down when the pandemic broke. We found ourselves now having the same needs as a district moving forward, but probably they've been exacerbated by the pandemic. I think, to your point, Lonnie, about the communication, this has been a very, very strange year for everybody. And, I know before the recording started, Mark was talking to Jay about, the benefits of participation, remotely, and more people can engage and so on. But I think also the work that is done in something like an override campaign, the work that is done in communicating between boards, between departments in our community, I think it slipped through the cracks in the pandemic, unfortunately. And, do I think we need to beat ourselves up over it? No, but I think it's just one of the things that have happened, unfortunately, in this situation. So, not to go on and on forever and ever, but yes, I think there's reasonableness in saying, look, I think because of limited revenue in our two communities, that need for a school operational override exists in both communities, generally on a 5-year cycle. Okay. But also, the formula that has worked in the non-override years, as we've talked about, is generally that 50-50 split of the 2.5 levy limit and new growth. And, with the fact that we've known that that's kind of predictable and we work around that, also has to be a piece with that.
Yeah, if I could add to that, if the expectation is that
Jay, sorry to interrupt you. But,
okay.
Joe, could you mute yourself because there's an echo coming from your microphone?
Oh, I apologize. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Go ahead, Jay.
I think if the expectation was that we, do this year, and let's say that we were successful, we wouldn't come back for 5 years, but then for the next 5 years, the town would level fund us for 5 years straight. That's not a tenable option. There has to be some increase of some kind on an annual basis, because otherwise we just continue to sink. But assuming that we go back to the practice of approximately 50%, the cycle has been the same. The first couple of years, the first 3 years, we kind of tread water and do the best we can. And then the last couple of years, we sometimes have to make a cut or two like we did in FY18 and 19 to get us through, to get to that 5-year span. But if it's level funding for 5 years and we're not supposed to come back, I think that is a challenge. So I think that would be the condition that I would want to make sure people are aware of.
Yeah. I think that from our conversations in Mendon, we have felt that there's a need to get away from the given that you're receiving the 50% of new growth, and that it should be that you're building your budget not based on what you expect from us, but rather build your budget and you come to us with what you need, and then we go from there. And so I know that's been a practice in the past, but it's something that we're looking to get away from, because we can't be giving up 50% of that number every year to start off our budget.
And if I can-
Sean had his, go ahead, Mike.
No, Sean. Sean had his hand up first. Go ahead.
Well,
yes,
it's our
thank you.
meeting, so.
Yes, thank you. That I just wanted to comment on that because I don't think that was the assumption that we had in building our budgets all the way from 2015 to 2020. I think if we look back at the percentages of increase that we asked from Mendon, I don't have the number from 15 to 16, but I have the numbers. So for 2016 to 2017, it was 1.92% increase. We never expected to get the 50% then. I think a lot of that money went back. There was actually, we've consistently been at, as a percentage of the Merseytown budget, we've been consistently hovering around 50% of the town budget for a long time. It's been longer than I have data for. So we've actually had situations where our budget was reduced as a terms of percentage of the town expenditure. Our budget was reduced in 2019 to 2020, for instance. So, there's a percentage of town budget was up like 0.5% in 2018 to 2019. So I don't think that there's an assumption at all that we're going to get the 50%. I think what we do is we build our budget and then we work with whatever kind of money the two towns have, and then we build out what we can apply to. Because I think there are actually some cuts that we had to perform in order to fit within the constraints of the town. So to me, I'm looking at the budgets go by and we're pretty much equal with what the town has been for a long time.
My memory is a little different from 11 years on the FinCom when and I got on. Rich Schofield was the FinCom chair, and I know Jay and I have had several conversations over the years that I think there was at least an element of your budget that was based on the assumption that you would give us we would give you 50%. And the reason that 50% number came there was, frankly, we had a crisis and we did not have enough money, and we cut on the town side. We laid off firefighters, and we didn't have properly staffed rescue, all kinds of cuts, and we gave you that 50% number because that was really a compromise. But that was, that was driving everything, because that's what we had. And then as we were really tight, yeah, right. And as it was really tight, started to get better. And I think what really going forward, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, Mark, but I think what we're saying is we just can't, that 50% number cannot be what drives the bus. And I have to respectfully disagree with you. From my perspective, being on the FinCom, that is exactly how it was built. Because I think if you ask the question, you would have liked more than that every year, but it was limited to that 50% number because sometimes we didn't even have that.
So let me just respond. I can see from the expressions on people's faces and everything. I know that we have a misalignment of perceptions, let's call it. But this is our chance to communicate more fully about what our intentions are going forward. So
I agree.
So I don't disparage anyone for having a different opinion about what went on in the past. That's not the point. I think we just have to look.
Sean,
I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead.
Can I just make a statement quickly?
Oh, I just wanted to finish what I had to say, Mark. I'm sorry.
I will let you in just one moment, because you said it's an opinion. of what's happened in the past, but the fact is Mendon has always given 50% of our new growth. So just want to make that clear. Go
Okay,
ahead.
so when I look at the budget numbers going back, if we're looking at numbers and facts, we now stand at roughly year over year, 50% of the expenditures of the town of Mendon. That's
Right.
what the school does,
That's
year
what
after year
drives
after
it.
year after year.
But
Correct.
That's
Right.
the same thing, though. We're saying the same thing. It's 50%.
Yes.
Even so, if we're giving you 50% of new growth and half of 2.5, then that's 50%.
Yes, but what I'm saying is if you reduce that new growth expenditure, right, the 50% of new growth, then by definition, the expenditure of the MERSD goes down as a percentage of the total town budget, correct? Okay. Right? And those are
I would
facts.
agree. I just don't think we've done it yet. That's why you're seeing it at 50%. What we're saying is that moving forward, the 2.5 increase is, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is again what we discussed.
Kim?
You know what? I'm just going to defer to Kim at the moment.
Yeah, let Kim speak. She's been on the edge of her seat.
So at
Go ahead.
that, if I say that is a plain fact, then what we're looking at here, we have to have some way to generate new revenue. If the school is cutting services in the last years of that so-called 5-year plan, right? We have to look at some way to generate new growth, or else we're going to be suffering. Both of us are going to be suffering, the town and the school.
You do have a way to generate new growth. It's from the 2.5% levy limit that the town gets through tax dollars. What you will not have going forward is half of the new growth that we bring in. And it's confusing, but they're two separate numbers. And what I would say is, even if we had given you the 50% number this year, it still wouldn't have met even half of your increase that you're requesting. So it basically became pointless for us to give you any, because your deficit still would have been, for us, $600,000. So, and I would have had to find that in the operating budget. That's
Yeah,
when you know
I
your
understand.
math is not sustainable.
So what I'm talking about, just so we're defining the right terms here, I'm not talking about the new growth that we have embedded within 2.5% levy limit. I'm talking about we need to generate more revenue as a town so that we can afford to have, hold it, please, so that we can have the services that we need for the town and the school. That's what we're talking about.
That's excellent. And I love that as a concept. I think we all agree and we love that as a concept. But we're talking about realistically how we sustain town services and the school budget that you want. What we're saying to you, and it's the same message that we've said this entire time, you guys know this. I have been as transparent as I can be. I'm all for you going out and getting the budget that you think that you can get supported within the town. But I cannot advocate for, and of course, I don't think these guys can support, a budget in which you are adding things to your budget, you're making additions, and we're doing that by decreasing the town's operating budget. And that's the point that we're at. So every year, please go and ask for an override for the services that you think the town needs, and hopefully they will pass. I think we can guarantee on this side, and we talked a little bit before the board, we're not going to go for an operational override in the next 5 years to sustain our budgets, because we've had to cut our budget to give it to you for your additions. I mean, I realize that we can look at the percentages, and yes, your numbers have changed over time. You have so many factors that go into what you do over there. Enrollment and different amounts of aid that you get and different, I understand it all, but the well on this side of the aisle is dry. We don't have it.
So very, very respectfully, because I really do appreciate that point of view, Kim. But I think we're looking at it from the point of view that says there is no possibility to generate more additional revenue in the town. And I think we're at a point right now where the state and the expectations of the citizens in the town and the expectation of the parents with their kids are all The state's decreasing their commitment, but the parents and the town official or the town's members are expecting more services. The balance, the structure of our budget is not going to be sustainable into the future. So if we get into a situation, and yes, I agree with your one fact you pointed out, Kim. I think our budgets are growing at greater than 2.5%, both the town and the school. So if we can't sustain that, then we're going to have to start reducing the amount of services we provide.
100%. But I can assure you that we have a part-time town hall, a part-time library, a part-time senior center. Our entire budget is a couple $1 million. And where we're going on our side for reductions is in public safety, because that's what we have left. I don't know if you've ever come to the town hall or you've been to our any of our buildings.
Sure. Yes.
We have duct tape on the hall and the rugs and the town hall on the floor. Yeah, I mean, this is a building that hasn't been painted for 15 years. I feel for your plight, but the idea that continues to be perpetuated, that you think that somehow we have somewhere in our budget to cut to help you sustain 7 additional positions it's baffling to me. Or the idea that we can just go and generate additional revenue. I'm not sure how you think that occurs. I mean, we just came through a pandemic. The feds are actually supplementing our lost revenue slightly with ARPA funds because growth is down so much. I mean, I am not opposed to the school and growth, but I am telling you, and this is the board's, I'd love to hear that you're not coming back for an override for the next 5 years. What I want to hear is that you're going to take 2.5% only for the next 5 years. And Kim, that's going to be enough.
Kim, again, very respectfully, I understand that you don't really appreciate the positions that we're looking for, right? I understand that, but I wish that you could speak to them so that you understood what the reasons are that we're getting those new positions. And if we could speak to them together as town leadership, then people would be able to make a decision about what they're voting for an override.
Okay, so again, there's nothing that we can do for you here besides vote and pick a date to put it back on the ballot, because there is no way that this board, and I'm going to speak for them, can support you adding 7 positions while we cut 7 to do that. That makes no sense. I mean, it just
I didn't really say that you have to cut. It's not, hold it. It's not a town versus school problem. We're trying to be together on this problem.
Time out. I'm going to mute you.
We don't have to be together.
I'm going to mute both of you. Stop. I don't have a gavel, but I have the mute button now.
Yeah.
So we can continue this conversation on and on and on and go in a circle around and around and around. I think it's important to note that we cannot create new revenue unless we have business development, and that is something we are working towards. It's going to take a long time. We don't have infrastructure that businesses are looking for, which is sewer and water. It's millions and millions of dollars to get to that point. We don't have our own wastewater treatment plant. We don't have our own water supply source. So that has been one of our biggest inhibitors in terms of moving forward in economic development. We just put an article on the town warrant to do something with our property on Route 16 that is prime business property. And the taxpayers and the voters said, no, we're not doing anything to change that, to allow us as a select board to make the move to bring in additional tax revenue to start to soften these issues a little bit. So without those options, we're stuck with the revenue we have, and it's based on valuations of properties that exist and the business development that happens within our town as it is now. So that leaves us with the options that we see year over year, which is struggling to fund budgets and overrides every so often. That's just the reality. If we could wave a magic wand and change this situation and bring in more revenue, we would have done that a very long time ago.
Mark?
Yes.
There's just one other thing, and I would look to Joe and to Jay just to clarify this for me. One change that I thought we had reached is by getting to a point where the percentage that the state funded, continually to reduce each year, and our required minimum local contribution would increase. But the fact that this year it didn't go up suggested to me that we had actually reached a tipping point where, the state was driving it each year to have us carry a larger and larger percentage of the budget. And with this point right now, I thought we were finally at a point where that wasn't going to be a moving target anymore. We had reached some point. Do you know if that's true? If this is just a momentary pause, or
Mike, I'm
going to continue every year?
Mike, I'm afraid, and I don't say this in a disrespectful way, I think that's magical thinking.
Okay.
For the simple reason that I think the numbers that we're receiving for FY22 as far as target share and minimum local contribution are outliers this year, for the simple reason that I think there have been dramatic enrollment shifts, changes in municipal growth factor, and so on. So when we look at the data, not only for Mendon and Upton, but also all of our neighboring communities from the two towns, we find a lot of apparent data. For example, let me give you Westboro as an example. Westboro, for at least the last 7-8 years, has been capped at the top at the 83.5% for target share. This year, it dropped down to something like 76, 77%. So we have found that of the communities, we've had these crazy swings where some have gone up and some have gone down. And we found that Mendon actually went down, but both towns actually went down. Mendon and Upton went down, but Mendon went down more dramatically.
So 10 years ago, I think you and I talked about this. The state funded 52% of Mendon's part of the budget.
Mm-hmm.
This year, it only funded 28% of Mendon's.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So my point is are you expecting that eventually the state's going to go down to zero? Or is there going to be some point when it's going to bottom out and is it going to fall to 25% and they're going to stay at that level? Or
the bottom,
it's going to keep dropping.
Yeah.
The budget keeps going up. But I thought that at a certain point, the state had a funding formula and they were driving us to a certain point, where we had these big drops certain years, and we were finally at a point where it was going to level off. But maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, so those are great questions, Mike. So really what you're kind of referring to is target share, and like the example that I gave you, Westboro and another community nearby is Hopkinton. They're at the top, and the top is 83.5%. So they're expected, as far as the foundation budget, that the community is supposed to come up with 83.5, and that's the absolute ceiling. In my 10 years as superintendent, we've seen both of our communities, push upwards. And I think at present, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jay, the target share for both Mendon and Upton is, kind of now we're in that low to mid 70s range. So in the span of 10 years, like you alluded to, Mike, it's gone up very dramatically.
So we've got about another 10% to go to get to where those other towns are.
Give or take, yes, that's correct.
Okay.
But our target share is we're not considered at that level, right?
No, we're not at 83.5% yet, Mark, but you're moving towards it. And you got to realize too, and this is part of the unfairness of the state funding formula that, and again, unfair in the sense that they change target share from year to year. So picture it's like the proverbial moving goalposts from year to year. But it's usually something like at least about 120 communities out of our 351 are at that 83.5. So basically they're saying 1/3 of the communities across the Commonwealth are considered to be affluent at the highest level.
Right. Okay, so I think that was good discussion on all of these. Is there any more questions from the select board members?
Yeah, I just want to clarify. This override's going back on the ballot. Well, I mean, we have to vote it, right? But my assumption is it's going back on the ballot. And if it's to pass, the expectation is for the next 5 years, we're going to live within 2.5, and whatever, if any, we're going to start at 0 every year on new growth. That's the plan, correct? We're all in agreement on this.
Lonnie,
We're
can
not
you
going to be coming
define,
for another override in 2 years.
Lonnie, can you define what you mean by live within 2.5%?
So we get to go up 2.5%. Our regular 2.5, and then we have new growth on top of that.
What I've been hearing here is that school district can't count on getting 2.5%. What we count on is getting 0. That's what I've been hearing people say.
No.
No.
So that's, I need clarification.
Wait.
That's not.
Mike. Wait.
Yeah.
What we're saying is that there should be no expectations from your point of view as to what we're able to provide. I know that seems like we're going backwards in a way of like changing how we, are doing things, but we're just saying that you can't expect that number. We're not saying you're not getting anything every year for the next 5 years. We're just saying you can't expect the number to be that.
So the goal would be that as we start to develop the budget, we have conversations. And I mean, I know that new growth and 2.5 levy is an estimate. And I believe if you guys are smart, and I think you are, you underestimate on that because you don't want to overestimate. That would be a bad way to budget. I wouldn't do it that way if it was me. So you come up with a number and you want us to come to you and say, this is what we need. And then we sort of try to come to some sort of consensus, which means that we need to start, again, part of the issue is that we don't get our state budget information till the end of January. And then we basically have about 40 days to get everything together, which means that we need to have more interaction between the board and the town and us in that, 1 month window, right? Because, I mean, you're right, Mark, guaranteed that, let's say new growth and whatever, the levy limit is about 600,000. Let's use a nice even number so we don't have to do hard math tonight. So that's $600,000, right, that you can sort of expect coming in. Historically, it's been, okay, the school can have 300,000 of that. That 300,000, we generally have a budget request that exceeds that initially, and we pare it back to try to get to a point where we think we can fit within what the town can afford. But if we think that in our planning stages, we start to develop this, we need to start with 0 as the number and then see what we can do. That creates a challenge that I would not personally want to say to you guys or anybody tonight. No, we definitely aren't coming back for 5 years, because if you tell us we can only give you 0, that really kind of leaves us out, off the plank, so to speak. Any more than the town could function with 0 as their increase for next year.
I don't think it's 0. I think the number is whatever's in that 2.5 number. The 0 number is new growth. That starts at 0. The 2.5 number, whatever that is, if we want to call it $150,000, is just to use nice even numbers like we're talking, because you're using a number of 300.
Yeah.
And the other 150 is new growth. Then the 150 is off the table at the beginning.
But the 2.5 levy increase is on the table at the beginning.
That's how I understand it. Kim, correct me if I'm wrong.
That's not what I've been hearing from Kim and Mark.
I feel like we've been having this same conversation since October. Can we just pick a date for the ballot and vote on it? The principle going forward is that we can no longer, the 50-50 that we used to do for new growth is gone, doesn't exist anymore, period. When you're putting your budget together next year, keep that in mind, because knowing that it's about another additional $350,000, you probably won't get it. You'll probably get 300,000, right? Or some amount of money, but it's not ever going to be like it was because we can't afford to do it anymore. That's it. Now, I know, and you know, there's no way you can guarantee you don't have to come back for 5 years without an override. I know that. I mean, you can't
Any
make
more
that.
than you can guarantee that we would always get $300,000, right?
Correct. I know it, which is why I know this is not
But
it's
so-
impossible to know.
So then summarizing it to Lonnie's question, it is not our goal to come back for an override every year. Certainly that's not what we want to do. And we would try to do the best we can over the next 5 years at a minimum to not do that. 100%
Right.
guarantee? No, nothing's 100% guarantee, except the lottery numbers.
And I've already said to these guys on different occasions, you know, you're looking for sacrifices on the town side in order to even up basically having to make reductions on your side. We'll implement a hiring freeze right now for and guarantee it for 5 years. I mean, we don't have a lot of things we need to change and grow and do besides pay our bills. And I know you're in the same boat, but we can't afford to undertake any new initiatives right now. We're not there. So I wish we were in a different situation. I wish we had more money, but we don't. And so until that changes, we have to live within the budget that we have. And this is it.
Okay.
So
Fair
set the
enough.
date and let's move on.
Yeah, fair enough.
Sean, do you have something new to add?
I'm sorry, was that meant for me?
Yes, Sean.
All I was saying is it's very important to me personally. I can't speak for Joe or Jay or Maureen, but it's very important for me personally to have this team work together better in the future. That's all I had to say. Because there will be some emergencies in the town that need to be, they need to see some sacrifices from the school. There's going to be some emergencies in the school that need sacrifices from the town. And if we, have a hard and fast rule that says the school's got to put up with less than 2.5% growth, I think that damages the relationship. So I think we need to have some flexibility to be able to work with each other to understand where that budget needs to be put. That's all I wanted to say.
I think that we all are adults and we work well together. So happy to continue that. My phone is always on. Email is on my phone and I check it constantly. So if someone has a question or a comment or wants to talk through anything relative to the town government or the school government, we're all available.
I will take you up on that. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so we need to come up with a date for the special election. Do we have a date in mind?
So when does, sorry, Ellen had put together a date of the earliest day,
Yeah, let me see.
which was June something. What's the last day of, huh?
29th is what you said.
Okay, so
Yeah.
school's already out by then?
I would think so, yeah.
What's the last day of school?
Lonnie, our last day is June 17th.
Does it matter if it's a Tuesday or a Wednesday or any of that stuff over there?
There's no activities going on at that time, Kim.
Okay, and so
I would say that,
Yeah, go ahead, Lonnie.
sorry, I
gonna
would just
say-
say the sooner the better, only because, I mean, I know people are gonna want to be getting out of here, especially after being home for a year. So if we want to turn out of a good voter turnout, then I would highly suggest that, we do.
So the soonest date is June 29th, so why don't we do that? I'll take a motion.
So moved.
Second,
All in favor?
Tenio, aye.
Raleigh, aye.
Real aye. Okay. You have the date. We need to approve language for override ballot question. Take a motion.
Sorry.
You want me to read it?
Yeah, go right ahead.
I move to authorize a vote for Prop 2.5 override to fund the following ballot question language. Shall the town of Mendon be allowed to assess an additional $803,338 in real estate and personal property taxes for the purpose of additional funding of the Mendon Upton Regional School District for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2021.
Second.
All in favor?
Morale, aye.
Tenio, aye.
Real aye. Okay. That looks good, and that's all we have. Is there any other comments?
Just again, if we can get that word out to folks that, the goal is to not come back for 5 years, and we're going to work diligently together to make sure that we can make that happen. I know there's no promises, but the fact that this was a 5-year plan, I was totally in the dark on it. I was actually thinking that next year there was going to be more of an ask. That's how I actually had it in my head.
So
Thanks,
if I could, Lonnie, we had sheets like this made in the Forward 15. What would you suggest we do to communicate it? We had all the 5-year plan in the last override. Is there anything we can do to help that?
When you say the last override, you mean last year or in 2015?
I'm sorry, 2015. Right.
Yeah. So
the 5-year commitment, we had it written up before. Is there anything you want us to do?
I would just say maybe do another write-up if we can get it in a town crier delivery before the meeting. Again, just so that people know. I mean, I'll tell as many people as I can, but I don't touch everybody, and but maybe between the 10, how many people are here? 50, it's actually quite a bit. 20 people that are here, that information will get out a bit. I mean, even a discussion with Karen Mead on the Mendon Facebook post thing, just to maybe discuss that a little bit with Karen, and maybe again somebody from the school may want to do that. I just so that you can articulate it better. I don't mind speaking with her as well. I know she has differing opinions on it, but if I think that getting information that is delivered to her on that Facebook page, she does put it out. I don't have Facebook anymore. I'm totally fed up with it, but so maybe that's why again I'm not in the know on something.
I just started. I just started.
Okay, throw it away immediately.
So can I add one thing to it? And I'm not trying to influence people to do different things, but I think in reality, what we're looking at this year is the town had budgetary needs that exceeded what they could. So they couldn't, in essence, give the school money because they would have to cut on the town side, which I get. But it doesn't help us when the officials of the town go out and speak against the school getting the money as well. Because in essence, what that message is that the town needs to take care of itself. We shouldn't have to cut it. School, you guys are on your own. And I don't think that should be the approach. I think it should be a collaborative approach because we are part of the town government, even though we're our own separate entity. We are part of your budget.
Mm-hmm.
Kim's waving at.
Yes, that's true. Our operational needs did not exceed, and that is not why. In fact, we cut an entire 6 months of a department this year in dispatch. And it's still, we didn't bring in enough revenue collectively to support our entire budget for the town, right? This is what's happened, not through increases. I mean, we're making reductions in efficiencies everywhere we can on our side, okay? That's just the nature of what we're doing. But I don't think it's just because these guys are in a difficult position. The best that they can be is neutral on this. They can have their own individual personal opinions, but on behalf, they have to support a town budget and town services. Personally, they can do whatever they want. But I mean, I think it's unrealistic to say that it's not fair that they're not coming out publicly and supporting it when basically that would be saying, go ahead, we agree with this, even if it means we're going to cut our budget. If we end up at joint town meeting, I think you're going to see a bunch of differing opinions come out pretty quickly.
Okay. Sean?
Yeah, this isn't in response to Kim. This is a different topic. Is there
Okay, good.
is there any way to is there any way to utilize the ESSER or the Biden bucks, let's call them, because I don't know which classification is here, but is there any way to any help coming for the town for the money that's been given?
Yeah, we've, Kim has started to go to some of these webinars and getting the background info on what this funding can be utilized for. And I think it's going to be, there's a lot of conversation that needs to be had about those funds and what we're going to do. But it's one-time money, and we need to be
And
very
it's only
strategic about
It's only $650. So realistically, one-time money, that's $650 that we're going to get half of now and half of in a year. And it does have a lot of ramifications around what we can use it for. It's, you know, I don't see that making much of a difference here.
It's 650 this year and 650 next year, or?
No, 650 total.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
The
we were
information that
hearing.
The information that Senator McGovern sent out that said that Mending was getting 1.8 million, you're saying that that was inaccurate?
Yeah, the ARPA number that we got yesterday with the spreadsheet, the same, followed the same webinar that I sent you about the regulations. Our number is 651.
Because ours got reduced too. It was like, not by, you know, went from 485 or 483 to 465.
So we should be getting the first installment of that very soon. And then when we cannot use it for sure is for stabilization or for debt payments, that we know. Then it's supposed to be infrastructure related and yada, yada. But let's face it, 650, I'm not going to complain. 650 is nice, but it's like getting, you know, a little bit more free cash, you know.
Yeah, thanks
Yeah,
for
but-
clarifying that. Thanks.
According to the federal government, though, infrastructure is anything at this point.
Now, Lonnie, calm down.
All right, I think we are done with this meeting.
Okay.
Take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So, okay, second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Tenio.
We're on.
Bill, aye. Thank
Good night,
you all.
everybody. Thank you.
Take care. Talk soon.
Good night, everybody.